Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Interview with the Vampire, a great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, we do have Daniel continuing to read Claudia's book, and he finds her kill book. Basically, she's listed all the people she's killed and ended up listing like the last things they ever said to her before she killed them. So yeah, and was it Rashid, the guy that serves Louis? Which is this the first episode Louis done that whole thing where basically, I guess it's like, right, he's able to send his thoughts into people. So it's like, right, while I'm feasting and I don't want to talk, you kind of be the person, you'll be kind of my voice. As he has talked about it before, he views Louis as a god and being the vessel in which like Louis can speak through, like he feels ordained. Ordained, feels special about that while also being the nutrients that he needs to survive as well. But he basically jumped on Daniel because he's like, right, you're like judging Claudia, but he's almost saying like you were kind of doing the same thing, I think, which is the nature of what you do. And for him, it's like there's a whole conversation about him telling the story, and I love that like Daniel continuously calls Louis out for like, right, you edit the story the way you edit the story the way you want it to be told. Like the whole point of this interview is to be as transparent. We weren't transparent before, we can be transparent now, and you want to edit everything that makes when we're not upfront about everything, it will make people question, like, well, if you're hiding this, what else have you hidden? Once again, it's like, I don't think anyone could ever be super objective in their own story because you're always going to have your own biases because everything is going to be shown through your experiences because any situation, there are three sides to everything. Your side, the other person's side, and then like somewhere in the middle is the truth. Like I think generally speaking, I mean, I don't know. I'm not saying people purposely lie, but sometimes, you don't want to paint yourself as Louis doesn't hide all the monstrous facts, but he does kind of dance around it from time to time. Once again, it's like, let the story seduce you, but it's like sometimes you need to just be like, no, I didn't eat the baby. Like it took a little while of Daniel to be like, did you eat the baby? Did you eat the baby? And so that's why it kind of like makes you go like, yeah, Louis doesn't, because you also don't know. It's like, well, I'd assume he didn't. Like I figured that would have come up, but once again, you never know. Might have actually eaten a baby, and that could have just been like, he wanted to edit things to make himself not seem as bad, but I think that's being true. But once again, unreliable narrator type of, situation. So either way, kind of really, getting into, where everything is, where Claudia is. The fact is, Louis scared because he's thinking she's like starving herself because he leaves her like birds and stuff to eat, but she's not. It's like, all right, let's stop, bring one of your victims back here. And it's like, dude, she's sneaking out when I'm going and you're not here, when you're not paying attention. She's sneaking out and eating. And then just like, fine, I'm gonna show you. Rips open the coffin, and then they find her journal, start reading it, and then Lestat was disgusted by what he read. Now, I know I talked about it. I did during the last week's review. I just don't remember if I kept all of it in, because I definitely know some of it I cut out just because I felt weird. Just for the context of so basically this episode hints at what I brought up previously about, like I said, that's why I don't know if I kept I might have kept some of it in, but the comparison to Jessica from True Blood, Deborah Ann Wool's character, where basically she was a virgin when she became a vampire. So every time she has sex and loses her virginity, eventually her hymen grows back. I might have cut around that. I might have kept some of it in, but not all of it, because I felt weird about discussing it, considering how old the character is. The actress who plays her, Bailey Bass, I would assume it's Bass, but maybe it's Bass, is like 19. So I figured she'd be like 18 or older, but it still made me feel weird considering how old the character's supposed to be of 14. So it made me feel weird having those conversations about it. But, it kind of comes with its territory. Because True Blood's the first thing I ever came across vampire fiction-wise that's ever really covered that subject at all, of someone's hymen growing back because every time they lose their virginity because they were a virgin when they became a vampire. This kind of touches on that too. And Lestat was kind of disgusted by it because it's like, he doesn't want to think about a child in that regard. But it's like, yeah, that's, that was the kind of the whole thing with the whole Charlie thing of it all too. But she's going around killing people, and when she comes back, Louis and Lestat kind of jump on her because it's like, right, We read your journals about all the bodies. Like, you haven't been bringing them back here to be burned, so what have you been doing with them? Well, the problem with the way she handled the bodies, they ended up floating to the surface, and it's like, oh, like, we heard about it, it was 6 bodies. It's like 6, more like 56. You're like, Jesus. Like, Claudia was going on a ripping spree. I mean, at least, like, I mean, God forbid, who knows how many are under Lestat's belt. But also, let's not forget, we also know that to be full, she needs about 2 kills. Plus, she's kind of, I think, taken a liking to the killing as well. It's like, it's her way of filling the void, because Charlie was the last person she cared about, so she kind of stopped giving a shit about humans in general. They're just food and things to hunt type of thing. I don't think she takes the pleasantry out of it the way Lestat does, but she needs to feel something. Him, I think he's overcompensating for some other shit too, because maybe in his own life he never felt superior, and now he feels so above humans that he looks down upon them and stuff, and anything like remotely human in Louis that he kind of holds on to, because he still tries to maintain so much of his humanity, so much of what makes him human, and that pisses Lestat off. It's like, right, just leave that shit behind, be with me fully. We are creatures of the night, we are immortal, we are eternal, we could be happy together. But once again, even like as Daniel said last episode, and so did Louis admitted it, right, Claudia was just a band-aid to a fucked up relationship, you know? And that's a sad thing. Like, there are situations where people think like, oh, getting married or having kids will fix their relationship. It's like, no, we'll work past in this regard. And that could end up being a very toxic situation, which this relationship reeks of such toxicity, because I mean, there's always been the complicated power dynamic of Louis being who he is, Lestat being who he is, coming from the backgrounds that they have, that Lestat can never fully understand Louis' perspective, his situation in this world. It's like, I mean, and I think it adds to the fact that because you're his maker, you can never read his thoughts, so you know, but I think it's also the point of, you shouldn't have to be able to read my thoughts to be able to connect with me, you know, so I think that kind of creates this dissonance and distance between them, but you know, maybe that's just me. But either way, they're trying to handle the situation because Anderson's trying to run like for city council or something like that, and he's going to need payment for all of them, but now they're trying to cover up the body situation. But by the time they get home, the cops are there because Claudia got drunk, which I didn't think that was possible for a vampire, because I figured I think it probably like takes a shit ton, especially for her, because her metabolism is like way faster than even Louis and Lestat's, but I wouldn't think getting drunk is possible. I mean, getting drunk off blood, sure, but not like just straight up drunk. I was like, wait, is she drunk? And now that turns into a whole thing. Oh, she also kept souvenirs, because like some of the bodies, it's like, oh yeah, like Anderson mentioned, like, oh yeah, like one of them was missing the left tit. He's like, why not get both pairs? I was like, what? She kept fucking souvenirs. I was like, even Lestat doesn't do that. We saw it. We saw the finger. We saw the toe. We saw the boob. And also the fact is she had a fucking dead body in her damn closet. It's like, wow. And also, Louis and Lestat had to cover up why they had, like, that furnace. And it's like, yeah, it's this and that. And the cops are going to be paying close attention to them. So it's like, right. So now it turns into a whole situation of, because she's so done with all of this, like, Louis jumping down her throat, Lestat jumping down her throat, especially because it's like, well, because he kept calling her a mistake. But it's like, oh, like, the fact is, she was coming from the perspective of, like, the fact is, oh, he's not just loving you, he's off with Antoinette, even though he told you, was it even last episode he told you, oh, that was over with. And it's like, okay, so, because he's not as in love with Louis anymore, because Louis, there's so much deep-seated resentment between both of them, but their unwillingness to let each other go, because it is that sad factor. It's like, if you ever seen the cartoon Oral, it reminds me of Oral's parents. Like, they're together because, once again, what did his mom say? Why not? That's not a reason to be with someone. It's why not? You should be with someone out of love, you know? I know that can get a complicated thing, but it's also like, you can see that Louis and Lestat situation of, well, we're together because, like, for Louis, it's like, well, you're the only vampire. No, you're my maker. Once again, that still complicates things with their dynamic and everything. Like, it's hard to be, I feel like, I don't know if you should ever be in love with the person who made you. That's complicated. I mean, it can work out. I mean, like, whether it be like a Damon and Elena thing, I mean, I guess that worked out in the end, but it's like, yeah, he kind of made her because it was his blood that made her into a vampire, so. that whole complicated thing. But like I said, there's instances of it, but I just feel like it's even more complicated because like just in a general sense, you have this like power dynamic over this person. You'll always have this like they'll always be drawn to you, and you'll always be drawn to them because of that like sire bond element. So it adds this little bit of an asterisk to your relationship to some extent, especially once again considering Lestat and Louis' different backgrounds. That adds a whole, like, it just layers upon layers of how complicated this relationship is. And you'd almost make the argument a lot of those complications, they haven't done a good job of dealing with some of those things. And I don't know. It wasn't a match made in heaven. And once again, it is a fucked up toxic relationship. And the fact is that, yeah. So in the next 7 years go by, Louis like going out trying to find Claudia. Lestat could care less. Well, I guess the proper phrasing obviously he couldn't care less. It's the proper phrasing. Sorry. I'm one of those people trying to adjust that part of my adjust that phrase in particular. Either way. But Lestat keeps putting it out there. She's going around reading in colleges, and she meets Bruce. Which, obviously, when Bruce references, like, oh, my maker was a European, you're like, could it be Lestat? I'm like, no. Because I feel like if she probably figured it wasn't Lestat and probably didn't want to ask. I wonder if she did bring up Lestat's name, would Bruce have known? But apparently Bruce had been like, oh, he's sweet talker and stuff like that. She's like, oh, you don't seem like a Bruce. He's like, well, what do I seem like? She's like, you seem like a killer. And he had this look at his face. I was like, oh, were you a serial killer before you became a vampire? Because I think that's because becoming a vampire kind of just heightens who and what you were, you know? And that's why, I mean, it's also like, that's also one thing Louis was saying about Claudia. She's perpetually in a state of puberty, you know? Because, she's at that age where puberty kicks in, maybe a little bit older, but she's pubescent in that regard, and it's like you're stuck perpetually in that age. So it's like, yeah, like you think teenagers are bad, just being stuck in like that state of puberty, like that age range forever. I'm like, yeah. And so, yeah, she's going to grow to eventually resent a lot about herself and Louis and Lestat, because it's like, why'd you make me? Especially when Lestat's like, oh yeah, you were a mistake, you know? Because Louis is the only one he intentionally made. He only made her because Louis asked her to. But then she was even telling Louis, like, why couldn't you just leave me alone? Let me be. Like, I could have I'm like, life probably wouldn't be great, but I'd be older. I'd be in love. I'd be able to have a family. Because it's like, right. Where's my Louis? Where's my Lestat? You know, it's like, I will never have that. Like, and she's been apparently trying to change. Because that's the thing. Even Louis hasn't attempted to make anyone, but Claudia wanted to. I mean, eternity is a very, very, very long time. And it's like humans in general, like even with our short lifespans, we should never go through this world alone. You know, humanity's all about connection. And I think that element is still there. I mean, even in a vampire, I feel like that element's probably just heightened even more. So that's, circling back, like that's why I was saying like Bruce was probably a serial killer, and it was probably heightened even more as like a vampire. But then like he started getting close to Claudia, and he's like telling her to read this book. I was like, about etiquette. I was like, that seems a little fucking pushy. And then also we got into like him like hurting her afterwards because she wouldn't play ball. He was like, oh, I did that so you wouldn't run away. And Louis tore out the pages related to that, and he's like, some really bad shit must have happened for Louis to tear those pages out. It's like, because she wrote about probably everything in details. Because wasn't it like 4 pages or something like that? You're like, God, what did he... Because he didn't seem like a nice guy. And it was almost like he was... And I'm curious like how she got out of that situation. Like, he must have just like... You can only imagine, and you don't even want to say the words because it makes it too real, but you're like, he probably raped her. And it's like, God knows like how... Like, he probably got bored and left. That might be the only reason why she got out of that situation. Who knows? But that's what pissed Daniel off. It's like, no. You can't, especially because he didn't want to include Claudia. He wanted context for Claudia. He wants people to, because as the way, Rashid puts it, it's like, this is a suicide note. You're helping Louis commit suicide, because the moment you put this out, every vampire around will know, oh, Louis in Dubai. So probably any vampires that just naturally hate him for whatever reason, just his existence, some shit he did to them over the years, they'll probably come like, because I was like, do vampires just like naturally have beef with each other? I mean, it doesn't mean anything. I mean, you don't play ball with them. We saw what Bruce, the little bit we saw what he did to Claudia is proof enough of like, you don't, they don't need a reason to be shitty. If you were shitty to begin with, being a vampire is just going to amplify your shittiness. So, she kept hearing Louis calling out to her because Louis had an idea of where she was, but Lestat was like, I actually have the genitalia you want. I'm a full grown adult. And I'm assuming, I don't know if that was Antoinette that was outside the window he was staring at, but it's just kind of like, right, I'm here and you're after someone who, like the person that decided to leave you. I'm here, I'm in front of you and you won't notice me. But Claudia ultimately decided to come home when it was all said and done. And that turned nasty because she even came. She's like, "Hey, I apologize," but he's like, "Oh, is that why you came here?" Like the apology. She's like, "No, what I came to do is get Uncle Louis. Papa Louis, because she had written in her journal that." Because she followed Louis when he went to go see his sister. His sister basically was like, I didn't know how to deal with this situation. I've sat across you for most of my life. You're definitely not my brother Louis. So she put him to rest like a tombstone along with their mothers. Like, yeah, Louis died 1930. So it's like, and it's her way because she's leaving him behind. And I'm so curious for the rest of her life. Did she, because he still has family out there, but it's like, yeah, like, oh, my uncle Louis, my brother Louis died. So I said mom, but I don't know. That might have actually been their, I would assume that was their mom's, because wasn't the grave like 23? So I think that was their mom's grave, maybe? I don't know. I don't think he was buried with their brother or not. Because once again, there's the complicated thing of suicide, you go to hell type of, once again, I've said it before, I do not like that. I really hate that belief. I don't know what that's rooted in, but that's always been one of those religious things, along with other religious things, but that one in particular, and almost like, once again, like, hating someone for, like, loving someone, like, all that, like, just irks my nerves, but, like, the suicide one really pisses me off for whatever reason. That's like, right, if you kill yourself, you're going to hell. It's like, fuck that, Whatever the case may be. Really, apparently she would follow Lestat and Louis around, and she says that it finally clicked in her mind why Louis wanted her maid. It's like, because Louis wanted family. I wasn't just a daughter to him. I was like a sister, because he actually lost his own, like, connection with his own sister. And it's like, they would never be together again. That's probably most likely the last time Louis ever saw his sister. Who knows? Maybe in the future he ended up tracking her, maybe his, like, nieces and nephew. Like, well, because I don't know if they ever specified whether the twins were nieces or nephews, or niece and a nephew, and because I think he had a young niece, the baby. Like, there's at least 3 like children from his sister, so he's probably kept an eye on his bloodline, but he's probably like always kept his distance. I mean, hell, for all we know, he might have interacted without telling them who he really was, obviously, but she came home and she was reading so much about the world because she was going to go, but she wanted to bring Louis with her because it's like, right, how do we know that the vampires out there really, well, she knows firsthand, and even Lestat doing the, like, this horrible shitty thing of like, oh, you've met them and stuff like that, And the fact is, what pissed Lestat off was that she was convincing Louis to go. It's like, don't stay with him. You see how that, like, anytime, like, he wants to hurt you and put you down just to make you feel like you're all you have is him. He wants to put you in a little box, and she's like, we can go, like, and it's like, for Lestat, it's like, no, you're not, it's like, he's having the man he loves. I mean, he hasn't really done the best job either way, and it feels less like love and more like possession. It's like, no, you're mine. I made you. It's like, why can't you love me as much as I love you? It's like, we've already seen him to be the abusive piece of shit that he is, and he expedited that shit even more in this episode, the way he was like going after Claudia yet again, and then like Louis and him tossing each other. I think True Blood has touched on some like vampiric, like, domestic situations like this, but this is domestic abuse to the nth degree, and tossing Louis around. Like, if you look at Lestat was not hurt at all. Like, I don't know if this is your typical thing of just like, right, because Lestat's older, like, older vampires are just naturally stronger, or whether it's just like Lestat has more access to his abilities. Plus, like, Lestat's actually been feeding on people, Louis hasn't, so he's probably already in a weakened state, so he probably isn't at full strength going up against Lestat. But Lestat, like, tosses him around. Like, and even Louis would be like, no, it's okay. And then Lestat, like, dragging him by, like, not even, like, grabbing his entire neck, like, pinching part of his neck and dragging him. Louis is a bloody mess. And it's like, Claudia's like, please, like, it's me that you're mad at. He was like, no, it was not you, because I didn't choose you. And he flies Louis into the air. I was like, this could get fucking bad. And he's just like, right, Louis, like, I loved you, but you don't love me as much as I love you. So tell me, do me the honor of just, like, telling me that you will never love me. Well, obviously, we know Louis was going to be okay, even when Lestat dropped him, but it still made me go, like, that could still get pretty bad. I mean, luckily, he landed. I guess you could make the argument the building broke part of his fall or something like that. Because I was almost like, that seemed like the height where a human hits the ground and could, but I'm like, that feels like the inside of your body should have exploded. Like, I could see you being like a puddle of mush after that type of fall. And just ending with Lestat looking like, I don't know. Does he fully regret what he did? I don't know, because maybe he thinks like, cause for him, it's like all this time, all the time I spent courting you, going after you, spending all this time, I could have been with someone else who actually loved me. So go ahead, you two, do whatever the hell you want to, travel the world together, but I want nothing to do with you. So where all this ends up taking us next episode, it's going to be so fascinating to see. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.